So in this demo, I'm going to show you how you can make this sculpture garden with this brutalist architectural aesthetic using Blender and PBR material workflows. And we'll be making both an afternoon shot and an evening shot. So let's get started. Okay, let's go ahead and make an outdoor scene. So what I'm going to try to essentially create is a sculpture garden. I'm going to make use of as many PBR materials and other types of materials as I can. And along the way, we'll look at some new tools within Blender. For instance, the type tool and using curves. So let's get started. I'm going to make this 30 by 30. Let's open up our panel here. And I'm just going to make this 30 meters by 30 meters. Let's go ahead and apply the scale. And now we have our ground. I'm going to go ahead and make some walls, maybe a ceiling. And we'll have some holes in the roof to let light through. So maybe we'll add the roof first. So let's go ahead and create a plane. And I don't think the plane is going to be the full 30 meters. Let's just make it a portion. For now, we'll figure out size and placement as we go. I do want to show you how to make a hole in polygonal objects, or to subtract or add one mesh to another. So let's go ahead and make a object we want to use to cut a hole in this piece of geometry. So I'm going to add a cylinder, and let's scale this up. So if I want to put a hole in the middle, what I can do is use our cylinder to cut that hole. So if I go down to modifiers and I go to generate Boolean, I can select that cylinder and let's hide it here in the outliner. And now I've got a hole in my plane, which is great. When I go to render that, now I can have light pass through that hole. But I didn't have to do a lot of work to create that. I do want to make it more realistic though, which means that it won't just be a flat hole. I'll probably have some detail architectural features here. So let's go back to solid view, and I'm going to duplicate this cylinder. We're going to call this ring. And let's go ahead and go to face mode. We're going to remove some faces. Okay. And let's hide the cylinder. We're going to rename that cutter cylinder. We're going to make a new collection, cutters, and we're going to hide this collection. Okay. Now with our ring selected, let's go ahead and scale that down. So I'm just scaling in the Z direction, and let's add a solidify to create that ring, and let's add a Boolean, not a Boolean, I'm sorry, a bevel. And we're going to need to apply the scale before we do anything. So let's go ahead and correct the thickness and go down to bevel and reduce the size of that bevel. And the reason we add bevels is to increase realism. If we do shade auto smooth, maybe what we'll do is add some subdivisions as well. And we'll do that first. And let's add a bunch. Okay. So right now you're seeing these facets because that is what is in the plane. So if I actually scale this up a little bit so it overlaps, now we're hiding those plane facets that were cut out with the other cylinder. Okay, so let's go back and configure our bevel. I want to add 3 segments, but what you see is we're getting some weirdness in our shading. And that's because I did shade smooth auto. If I do shade smooth, it will fix it, but we'll also try to shade the entire thing a bit too smoothly. So I go down to shading under bevel and do harden normals, and that will make sure that some of the faces don't try to get overly smoothed over. Okay, so essentially we have this ring that we can just put in the ceiling, and now it will look a little bit more like a feature that was constructed. And let's go ahead and switch to cycles. I'm going to turn on GPU compute, and if your computer isn't handling this well, you can just work in texture preview viewport mode. That'll be fine for you. But in this case, I think I'm going to go ahead and take this light and turn it off. Let's add a light so that way I can see how light is bouncing around my scene from the beginning, and then I can kind of design with light in mind. Go to shading, go to world, and let's just add a sky texture for now. Let's turn off sun disk. Let's go back to this mode here. Maybe I'll turn that sun disk back on so I can get that nice shadow. Okay, let me see. I want to change the elevation. Okay, that's working. All right, so let me go ahead and configure this piece at the top a little bit. All right, so my plan is to have something of a focal point right beneath where this light is. So I think I actually want this to be almost 90 degrees so the sun is right overhead of this spot. And I do have a cylinder before that I used to cut the hole, so I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that again. And maybe I'll make a new collection, call this architecture. I'm going to call this floor ring. I'm going to re-hide that collection there. And let's take a look at what we have. It's a bit hard to see because it's pretty bright. Let me go ahead and turn this sun disk off for now. Maybe we will also adjust the light, or the base color rather, of this material. Okay. All right, so I think I'm gonna have some sort of sculpture, maybe some terrain on this. So let me go ahead and think about how this would be displayed or maybe constructed. If I was to, let's create an edge loop here. Okay, and let's go to face mode. Select that ring by doing Option Shift and clicking one of these vertical edges. Let's press E, and I'll press S to scale it so it comes out perfectly. And now what I'll do is I'll select this middle face, and I'll press E to bring that down, and I'll scale it in a little bit so it's almost like a dish in a way. Actually, that's not what I want to do. I think I'm going to grab this edge loop as well. Let's scale that in a little bit, and that way I can push this straight down. Okay. So that's my focal point here. Let's build some walls. So if I was to just add a cube, and we'll move this over here. Sometimes I like to use the tools like the gimbals that are on screen, so I can more directly manipulate these. So let's just put a wall there. Press Shift D, put a wall on this side. All right, I'll do Shift Select for both, do Shift D, and I'm just moving them away, and then I'm pressing Escape. RZ90. All right, and now I've created 4 walls. Let's see where our camera is. Okay, so let's lock the camera, position it down a little bit. What I like to do is try to build as real-world scale as I can, which means I want the camera to be as if it's a person looking into the space as they're standing. So what I like to do is add an empty object. These plane axes are fine. I'm just going to move it roughly over to where the camera is. Okay. All right, so right now it is at 0 in the Z direction. What I can do is, since I know that I'm roughly 1.6 meters tall, I can go to location and type in 1.6. And then I can make sure my camera is always at that height. There's a fun trick to get your camera to always be at that height no matter where you're looking or how you move your camera around. It's called using an object constraint. So with our camera selected, we can come down to the Constraints tab, click on Add Object Constraint, and go to Copy Location. And we can pick a target object that we want to copy the location attributes from. In this case, I actually don't want it to do X and Y, I just want Z. I want to be able to move the camera around space, but just not move it up and down. I want to be able to rotate and look up and down, but I'm going to do so from always the same elevation. So now when we look through the camera, let me go ahead and just put in something like a 22mm lens. So it's more of a wide angle. As I move around the space and look up and down, you can see that it's kind of adjusting the height, or always compensating and moving that height back into place. So my camera is locked vertically, but I have my rotation and my X and Y dimensions still work. Okay, so that just makes it easier for me to set up the camera in the future. Okay, if I do frame selected, okay, and the reason I did that is because the scale of the scene was getting a little bit weird, so I needed to reset that so I could zoom my camera a little bit easier. Okay, so now I can easily position this. Actually kind of look like some of the scale that's happening. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit. Okay, so I think I want sort of a concrete space, maybe something green in here, or maybe some kind of sculpture, something like that. that kind of makes some this sort of portal becomes logical, where it lets light in for a reason. So to do that, I'm going to go grab a couple texture packs, and I'm going to apply them to my objects. So the first thing I need to do before applying those things, make sure my scale is set to 1, and it's not going to be doing that for everything, so I actually don't need all this thickness here. So to make my life easier, I'm going to go into vertex mode, and let's just look through this orthographic view. We're going to delete the vertices there. Select this object, press X, delete the vertices there, and we'll go through this direction. All right. And roughly how tall is this? So I wanted to make this somewhat to scale. So if I was to SZ to scale this, actually I can just look at the dimensions. I know I want this to be somewhere between 3 and 4 meters, so I could do something like 3.5 meters, and I can turn on snapping and set that to vertex, and then pull up on the blue axis, and then just hover over this corner, and let me pull it past actually, and then pull it down, and then hover over the corner, and then it'll sit it right on top where it needs to be. And then the other ones, should do Control A, let's apply the scale, and instead of resizing the other ones, it's fine how they are. I guess if I'm going to be applying a texture, I do want them to be the correct size. So maybe what I will do is match that Z height. So we'll do 3.5. Oh, there we go. Okay, 3.5. I was looking at the wrong attribute. Okay, 3.5 and 3.5. Okay, so now I can pull this past, start moving it down, and then just hover over the vertice I want it to snap to. Guess I'll be in solid view, so this goes a little quicker. Okay, and I can move these as needed. Let's go back to render view just to see what I'm working with. Okay, so I probably will make some changes. Maybe I'll add some stairs or some windows or a door or something. But for now, I'm just going to work on the centerpiece. So to do that, I'm going to get a texture pack. I do have Node Wrangler turned on, but if you don't have that, you should turn that on now by going to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, just type in Node and turn on Node Wrangler. Okay, so let me go ahead and create a duplicate of, let's get out of my render camera. We have a face here that I want to duplicate. So I want to press Shift D, and so that'll bring that out, and then I can go to Mesh, Separate by Loose Parts. And so now I can take this one and just bring it back down. I'll scale it up just slightly. And now you can see we have that duplicate piece there, and I'm going to add a new material to this, and for now I'll just throw a different color on it. Let's take a look at its UV layout. So I think we can optimize that. I'm going to go ahead and do pack, and now we'll take advantage of that full texture space. We might adjust this later, but it's a good starting point. All right, so typically to make something feel real, it needs to feel like it's actually constructed, and it needs to be something that wouldn't be perfect like computer graphics would make it. So that's why we add bevels to things. I'm going to go ahead and add a subdivision surface here, and so that's actually smoothing it pretty nicely. I'm going to do shade smooth here, and I'll grab this and just scale this up. Okay, so it's scaling weirdly because my origin point is in a weird place. To see where that is, you can see it's way down here. So what I want to do is go to Object, Set Origin, and move my origin back to this geometry. So now it's in the middle. And now when I press S to scale, it'll scale properly. Oop. Let's turn off snapping. Okay, and I think what I'm going to do is add some supporting edges here so that I can push this to be flatter here. Okay, and we'll bring this back in. All right, and let's go ahead and add supporting edges here. The reason I'm doing this is because, let's turn on X-ray so I can select through. I'm going to bring this up to be sitting on top. Let's just go to a side view. Okay, so I just want to make sure that we're getting these places where shadows can form and ambient occlusion can gather. That way it makes it look and feel like more of a built object. All right, so I mentioned before I was going to get a texture pack. Let's go ahead and do that now. With this selected, we're going to do Shift W, add principled setup, and let's go and get, let's see, what is this? So this is going to be sand. Yeah, we're going to get this one. This is ground 37, and this is from ambientcg.com, so if you want to use the same one, you can just look at the file name here. And there we go. That's our material brought in. And if I'm going to configure displacement, I'm going to go ahead and save this out. So I'm going to go to experimental here. Under cycles, I'm going to go back down and add subdivision surface under my modifiers, and I'm going to use the adaptive subdivision feature. You certainly don't have to do that. Okay, I think actually this geometry is not working so well because it's an n-gon. We're getting a lot of stretching. Let me see if I can fix that. All right, let's do merge at center, and there's a bunch of ways to build these kind of filled in pieces. You're trying to get quads usually. I'm going to try this method. There are other methods to fill these in, but this might work. I'm going to go ahead and delete these. I'm going to dissolve the edges. Okay, now we have quads. And let's see if that is looking any better. So you'll see it's way less distorted even though our subdivision is still active. That's what I was hoping would happen by adding those faces. Okay, so let me see here. We aren't getting any displacement, and that's because it's not turned on by default. So you have to go into your material settings, go into settings, and turn on displacement and bump. So that's displacement. Let's go ahead and do 0.02. Maybe 0.01 even. Okay. And let's see what it looks like with the sun disk. Wow. That is bright. Let's do 0.25 for intensity. Yeah, that might be a little too on the nose, so let's just change the elevation. Okay, we'll take a look at how to improve that later. Maybe I won't use the sky texture. Now let's bring in maybe some concrete material. So add a new material here. It's really convenient. You can do this right from the shader editor, but you can also come down to the shader tab and add one using the add new button as well. Okay. Shift W, try that again. Shift W, add principled setup, and let's see, I have a couple different types. Let's see what 42 looks like. All right, so I'll go with concrete 42A, and let's select these textures. And the mapping is not so good on this object, so I'm going to see if we can unwrap this to be a bit nicer. Let's just try Smart UV Project, see how well that does. So that's, as long as we're not seeing any seams, we should be fine. I don't see any immediately that are noticeable. I do think the normal map is set too high. So just to show you, I think I can maybe take that down as well. Actually, the normal map may have been fine. It may have been the displacement map. Okay. Let's go down to settings and enable displacement. And we don't have enough subdivision. Let's add adaptive subdivision. So I don't know what this is going to look like. We'll add something like this. Let's take a look at the render view. Okay, let's just take a look at it through the camera. That looks okay. One of the things I might want to do though, this is so flat. There's no reason for it to be this flat. I think I can just grab a vertice and turn on our proportional editing, and then pressing G and Z to go in the Z direction, and then on the scroll wheel on my mouse, I'll just scroll out a little bit, and then I just kind of made this a bit raised. If I want to get some more detail out of the gate, I can select everything, right click and hit subdivide, and that will enable me to get around using the adaptive subdivision restrictions I might have. So I can just kind of come in and almost sculpt this area. Let me just press Z. Okay, and yeah, now it's getting a little bit less perfect, which is what we want. Okay, what do I want to have in the middle? I'm probably just going to add some basic shapes here, and this will probably be some kind of metal. So let me add a new material. I don't know why it's always off screen when you create a new material, but you have to kind of pull it down. Let's do Shift W, add principled setup, and I have a metal pack already downloaded. Okay. Cones are pretty difficult sometimes to work with. Let me go ahead and open up and enable displacement. I don't know that there's actually much displacement happening. It's pretty subtle. This might not even really be worth the extra computation, so I'm going to delete that. Let's see. I don't love this color. Let's see, it's this kind of copper color. It's not very convincing here with this lighting. So maybe what I'll do is add a hue saturation value node, and I can exaggerate the color by increasing the saturation. Okay, maybe I'll make this smaller, and So I'll add some other objects here as well. So I'm just adding some icospheres. And, I want to think about composition a little bit. So where to put the large and small and medium-sized objects is going to be important. So maybe if I want to draw the eye in, I really need some lines. Creating that right now. I have lines going all over the place. Trying to extrude. Okay. So the walls are kind of in the way while I'm working, so I'm going to go ahead and hide these. Okay, that'll be a little bit easier. So I think I want something like yeah, that's going to be good. Maybe this will be the base. Yeah. So I'm going to add a curve, a Bezier curve. And if we bring the Bezier curve up, we can rotate that. And I'm thinking about using it like a stem. So if I was to go into edit mode here, we can see my Beziers, and we can turn on snapping to vertex, and I'm just going to snap. I'm going to try to snap to this. There we go. I'm going to go to solid shade view, turn off X-ray. I think that's going to be much easier to work. And then we'll bring this guy in here. Let's turn off snapping. Kind of thought that would stay put. So I think we want to go and move the origin. Let's see if that makes a difference. Ah, I know what it is. This happens all the time. Make sure you turn off proportional editing. Really easy to be very confused by leaving that on accidentally. Okay. Let's just take a look at what this should look like. If we go down to our curve data properties, we can actually just create some geometry off of this. So let's go ahead and add depth here on the bevel, and now we're getting this pipe-like object. Let's increase the resolution, and actually let's move this down, bring this up. I guess it doesn't need to come right out of the top, so we can have it come out of the side maybe. Okay, so now I'll just repeat this for the other ones. So this is acting like a support pipe that will hold up and connect to these objects. Okay, and Shift D, we're going to do that again. Maybe we'll move this this way. I want to try to make it look varied. Okay, press Tab to edit and just move that point in. Oh, I forgot. Going to this one up here. Okay, it looks like we're getting a little bit of overlap, so I do want to, I don't like the silhouette, so let's grab this one and redesign the shape. Okay, let's just do that from the camera view. Grab this and it might be fun if it came out of the front. Something like this. And then we can add additional control points. So if we go to segment subdivide, we can subdivide that, and then we'll get a nicer, smoother result as well. So I'm gonna also subdivide this one, just A to select all, subdivide, and subdivide. Okay, so I'm liking the look of that a lot more. And let's just put all of these in their own collection. I'm going to call this plop art. You just take art and you plop it down. I didn't come up with that term. Let's drop this here in our new collection. And let's just try to maybe reposition it. All right. Well, it's sort of like a, I don't know. I have no idea how to describe what that is. But it has some, adds some visual interest to the middle of the scene. I'm kind of debating whether something should go up through the light. But for now, I'm just gonna kind of move forward with this. Let's see what we have. Let's go ahead and add that same material. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select my 3 stem objects first, and then shift select the object with the material that I want to add last. By doing Command L, I can bring up the link menu, and then I can say link the materials, and it'll essentially just add the material to these other objects. Maybe I'll take that value down a little bit. darken it. Okay. And now we need to add a material for these. Not really sure what I want to do with these, but let's make them glossy. Ooh, I like pink. That's good. Yeah. Right, same process, like materials. And I actually want to keep these facets, but I don't want it to look too perfect. So what I can do is add a bevel modifier. Let me go ahead and do Control A and add the scale. And now I can add this. Actually, I don't think the bevel modifier for some reason works on this particular shape. I don't know if it's the angle or let's take off limit. There we go. I think it was being limited by the angle. So let's go ahead and increase the amount. I'm going to add 3 segments and do shade smooth and go down to harden normals. So we're getting this kind of smoothed but yet faceted object. So it looks a little bit more realistic than something like these would look. What I can do now is let's apply the scale to these 2 objects. Select this last object and go to our link menu and do copy modifiers. And now we've copied the modifier settings over to these other objects. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and save. Let's add some concrete to the ground. I'm going to go ahead and make a material change here. Let me select this and do Shift W, add principled setup. Just trying to see what this one looks like. Let's do I think it's this one, 31. Okay. Right, apply the scale, and we really need to change the global scale of this particular material. So under the mapping node, I'm going to go ahead and make this 4, and that will reduce or start tiling it 4 times in the same area, so it makes it smaller. Let's try 8. Okay, now we're getting these squares in, so I think we're almost there, maybe 10. Okay, yeah, that's a good scale. I like 16. And let's just double check our settings. I don't think we're using displacement yet, so let's turn that on. Turn this on 0.01, and it's kind of light though. Maybe I want to darken up the floor. Let's go ahead and mix in that ambient occlusion. Okay, and then we can put a hue saturation value and just bring the value down. And now we're getting a little bit of differentiation. this one maybe needs to be brighter. So let's do that same workflow. Let's go ahead and do a mix color. Bring this into B slot, and we're going to do multiply and put factor at 1. And let's just add that hue saturation value and bring up the value. So it's almost like white concrete on a dark concrete floor, creating a little bit of value differentiation. I think I want to match the, I'm not sure which one I want to match yet. We'll see if this looks good. Let's just go ahead and add that. Let's name the material number 1. We're going to call this light concrete. And let's go ahead and choose that from the list. We're going to call this one dark concrete. This will be called grass. And this is sort of like a, I don't know, maybe a brass type of a color, or like a rose gold. And then pink plastic. Okay. There we go. I think there's a few other things we want to do before we're done. Let's see if this is pointed the right direction. So I'm going to turn on face orientation. So I don't really want this side to be reflecting light because it might not work very well. I could either flip it or I can add a solidify modifier. So maybe I'll just try the solidify. Okay, and let's add our scale. Let's turn off our face orientation, and I think that's working pretty well. And now this one, we can maybe add that same material to. This is light concrete as well, okay. And let's see, this is pretty warped, so part of that is the solidify probably needs to be applied. So I'm going to apply that. We need to be in object mode. And we're going to move bevel up above subdivision. And let's go ahead and do smart UV project and see if that did all the work for us. We do have a seam here. I'm going to try rotating this so that we don't have to look at it, but now there's another seam over here. Okay, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of work on this. So if the camera's coming that way, I'll make my seam split here. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and turn on my wireframe in solid view here. We are going to disable these, and that way I can just mark my seams. Okay, and then we'll also mark this seam here. So UM will mark the seams, right? And now I can unwrap it. So let's see if that worked. Turn off wireframe. So there's a seam here, but there's no seam over here, which is what we need. Okay. All right, so I think we can go ahead and add some walls back in. I do want to add some text though. There's a really nice tool in Blender called the text tool. So if we do Shift A, we can go down to text, and let's go ahead and configure that. There we go. If we hold Control, we can snap to particular degrees. I am going to pull out the transforms here and just do that perfectly 90. All right, let's zoom in. I'm going to go ahead and move this over a little bit. If you want to change what the text says, just go to edit mode, delete the text, and type like normal. So I'm going to type in garden. I'm going to type in brutal sculpture garden. All right. So this is the name of my garden. And let's go down to the settings here under data. If we go to geometry, we can extrude this. Okay, now we have nice architectural block letters. This would be good to put on a wall of some kind, so maybe I'll build that now. So let's add a cube. And there we go. All right. I'm going to go to layout mode here so we have some more screen real estate. If you want to go full screen, you can do Control Space Bar, and now you have the whole screen to do modeling, and you can get rid of the sidebars temporarily. I like the thickness of this actually, so I'm going to keep this. Let me just try to sit it on the floor though. So what I'll do is I'll go into edit mode and all right, let me bring that back. I keep accidentally hiding the collections. All right, let's go to solid shade, grab these vertices, go to snapping. And if you don't have a vertice to snap to that's in the area, we can also snap to the face. So I just snapped right to the face because pretty much surrounded by that floor. Okay, so just like with all the other objects, I really want to add a bevel. All right, let's add our scale, or apply our scale rather, and bring that bevel down. Add 3 segments. I'm going to do shade smooth, and I'm going to open up shading and do harden. And we'll see how this ends up looking in the space. So I'm going to go ahead and try to turn that snapping off. And let's just set this up. I'm going to turn on local transform here so I can move this The spacing is a bit weird. Let me see if I can change that. Yeah, there we go. So under line spacing, we can tighten that up. And character spacing, can change the kerning. I will say this kerning is really bad. I don't know if I can adjust the individual kerning properties for the letters. I don't think I can right now. So I think what I would do is, if I had more time, I would either create this in Illustrator as an SVG and bring it in, or I would apply this and then move it over as mesh. Maybe I'll do that at the end. Let's choose a different material for it. Let's go ahead and add new. We're going to call this metal text. We're going to make it metallic and dark. All right, so as with everything else, really want to capture highlights on those edges. So luckily for us, if we go in here, we can open up geometry and add some bevel. Right, so now we just get a little bit of bevel, and that's just capturing those highlights, which is exactly what we need. One of the fun things we can do is instead of rendering with the fill mode on both, we can actually just do none, and it will do these kind of metal cutouts, which are kind of neat. The other thing we can do is Shift-D, duplicate, press escape, and it'll put it back where it was. And then I can just do front and then slide that back a little bit. And now we have some kind of more fabricated looking letters. So that's pretty cool. Let me go back to the metal. Let me go down to roughness. I don't think I adjusted roughness. Okay. We're going to take our text and put that in architecture. And same with our cube. We're going to call that sign. Okay. And we could, I don't know, try to design this a little bit more. So I'm just doing Command R to add these edge loops, and just selecting these bottom ones, and I can just scale. So I don't want it to lift off the floor. If you want to essentially scale, but not scale in one particular dimension, like the Z-axis, I can do Shift-Z, and now it will just scale X and Y, which is pretty handy. All right. And if I want to, I could could actually bring this up. So if we turn on snapping to vertex, if we grab the blue handle here and I hover over these other vertices, I can bring that bottom to be flush instead of being angled and lower. Let's see what that looks like. All right, let's see if I can get a texture on here that I like. So what about this like concrete? Looks okay. Go back here. I don't like where it's positioned. Whoa, okay, so we need to go to global here, I think. Turn off snapping. There we go. Oh, I have to make sure I get everything. I feel like brutal sends the wrong tone here. It's the, or sends the wrong message. Brutalist is really, that's what I was going for. Let's try. Okay, and almost done. Okay, let's bring those walls back in. Okay, so why don't we try the dark concrete on these walls to create some difference. Let's go in edit mode. I feel like if we go to UV editing, let's take a look at this is probably too small. Let's just see the texture. So these are the size of the squares here. If I scale this up, oh, that's having the opposite effect. Let's scale it down. So I'm just trying to match these squares to these squares. So that's pretty close. Let's try to line the seam up a little bit. Maybe I'll just move the material. the wall itself. It's probably going to be close enough. One of the things I want to do is make sure that I'm solidifying this and adding my bevels. Okay, let's just add a couple subdivisions or segments, shade smooth and shading harden normals. Okay, now we're getting that crease on the bottom. I think maybe it's too much of a bevel. Let's make it smaller. Okay, that's good. And rather than go through all of that again, I'm going to just duplicate this one. So actually, texture preview is going to be pretty helpful in lining this up. So I'm just scaling this to try to get these seams to be somewhat close. That's actually almost perfect. So now I'll probably, since this one is good, okay, if you have trouble navigating and zooming in, just do frame selected. I added view frame selected to my quick keys by right clicking and add to quick favorites. So now when I press Q, I can always just get back to frame selected. Okay, that looks good. It's a nice preview of that material there. I want to create some variation here. To break this up a little bit. Maybe there's not enough time to fully design this space, but let me see if I can. Maybe I'll close this gap up and okay. So let me go to layout. Let's save this, and I'm going to look through our camera, lock the camera, and let's just look at where we should maybe take our photo from here. This piece coming over the top is cool. It's just very unrealistic. So maybe I can try to make it make more sense somehow. Okay, I see. So if we add some thickness to this, go to add modifier, deform, not deform, generate, solidify. And let's add our solidify. And we can add our bevel. And actually, I could probably just leave it similar to that, or maybe add another bevel. Okay, I'm just turn wireframe on here. And let's see what we have. Okay, so that's not working. We're gonna turn off limit. Oh, we have two solidifies. Okay, I see what happened. Let's turn that one off or remove it. And let's duplicate. Shade smooth, and then we're gonna do harden. And we probably need to apply the solidify. And let's do UV, Smart UV Project. Let's try that again. Press A to select everything. Smart UV Project. There we go. Another thing we can do is if we need to make a unique material, we can see we have light concrete used 4 times. There's 4 users of this material. If I want to make this uniquely edited in some way, I can click on the 4 and now it's another material. So I can call this light concrete roof. And if I go into the shading node, let's just take a look at that. Roof edge. I could see what generated looks like on that. Let's go down, make sure, yeah, displacement's turned on, okay. And let's add our subdivision surface. Adaptive. And that's going to give us more detail. I think I'm going to stick with the UVs for now. Okay, that should be fine for our roof. Now it looks like something that, oh, I see. So our subdivision, let's try simple. Nope, that's, so the Boolean probably needs to happen at the end. You'll notice that adaptive subdivision only works if it's at the end. So if I put the Boolean here, adaptive subdivision works, but now we're getting this issue where it's not maintaining that whole. I think we're going to not use adaptive subdivision, and we'll just leave that subdivision turned off. I don't think it's going to be enough of a difference for me to want to spend time fixing that. I think it is definitely fixable, but kind of running short on time to get this finished. So, okay, let's take a look at our world shader here. We are using the sky texture. Let's put that sun disk back on. Okay. Let's move this around. Let's do sun rotation. And okay, looks like this one accidentally got the wrong material. Let's put that back on brass. Okay, I think I'm gonna render this and see what it looks like. So let's go up to our output settings, and we're gonna render at 1920 by 1080. If you want, you can do 200%, and you can make a 2K or 4K image that way. If we go down to file format, we're going to change that to OpenEXR, float half, and we're going to do RGBA is fine. There's not going to be any alpha, but we're going to render it as an EXR. So let's go ahead. Actually, we can save it out in the render window anyway, so it doesn't matter if you configure this or not. So do render image. Actually, let's select some settings here. So under render, if you don't have a video card that will enable you to render this many samples, just rely on the denoiser. I'm going to use 4096 default, but the denoiser should do a pretty good job getting a good result. Otherwise, you can let your computer render overnight and it should finish however many samples. I mean, I wouldn't go over 4,000, but you can put the samples up pretty high and it should eventually finish. Okay, let's go to render image. Okay, so the render just finished. Let's take a look at what we can do now that it's done. I'm going to go to image, save as, and I'm going to go ahead and name this sculpture garden. Okay, and we're going to do OpenEXR half RGBA. That's good. I'm going to click save as. Okay, and I'm going to open up my image in Photoshop. All right, so just to show you what we have happening here. So if we go to image mode, you can see we're now using a 32-bit image. You see that there's some highlights blown out here and the sky's blown out. If we go to exposure and bring that exposure down, you can see the blue of the sky coming through, all those details coming back. If If we increase the exposure up, you can see there's some detail in the darks. Not a ton more, but mostly in the bright areas, we're getting a lot more detail. So what we can do is take a look at maybe some HDR toning we can do. Okay, so in the HDR toning dialog box, I can use the levels to the curve to change the levels in the lows, mids, and highs. So I'm going to see if I can get the right kind of look that I'm going for. Okay, so you can see here I have this curve mapped to where it looks like most of the color information is. And so I'm going to click OK to confirm that. And now I'm going to add a color lookup. And I really like the Kodak 5218. And I think I'm going to also add a vignette. So one way to add a vignette that's really easy, you can just on a black layer, actually we can add a color layer here. So let's go up to a solid color, click OK, and then under layer mask, let's select the mask. Okay, I'm gonna fill black in the ellipse while I'm on the layer mask, and Command D to deselect, and then I'll just feather, I'll bring this up and feather it. I can also bring this underneath the lookup table to get that lookup table applying to that vignette. I'm going to feather that a little bit less and then drop the opacity. Right, it's about this time that I noticed, and I'm sure some of you did, that I spelled sculpture wrong. I don't know why I didn't see that when I was complaining about the L and the T not being kerned properly, but that will need to be re-rendered. Okay, I think I'm going to scale this down. It looked a little bit big to me. I also don't love the sign. So if we're just looking at maybe critiquing the image, since we have to go back and re-render it anyway, I don't love the sign and its relationship to the space. I don't love the size of the text as well. It's kind of taking up too much space. So I think I might just put the text on the wall or something like that. So yeah, let's see what I end up coming up with here. Okay, so what I've done is I've moved the lettering onto the wall, and I've spaced it out, and I think the new size and shape is taking advantage of the shadows really well. I've also added a couple more skylights in the ceiling to bring a bit more light down and to create some more visual interest, and also to repeat this kind of motif that's kind of an architectural element that wouldn't make sense maybe to be there only one time. There's probably a lot more I could continue to work on, but I think for now this is as close as I want to be to a final design. Okay, so I've re-rendered the image, and now I will save it as an EXR. We can use the plus button here to increment our image. Okay, so here's the image opened in Photoshop. I opened it in a new layer or a new file, and I'm going to do the HDR toning process. So my curve looks something like this. Yours might look very different, but essentially I'm trying to keep some of the highlights to be bright. I want to make sure I still get some of that sky in there, and I'm cutting out some of the gray wash by cutting out some of the low color information here on the left side of the curve. So I'm going to go ahead and just use this, and I'm going to bring that into this image where I did my initial. I'm going to bring these layers, the color lookup and the vignette, I'm going to drop them on this one. That way I don't lose my work. Okay. It looks like my vignette is a bit out of place. So let me go ahead and recreate that. There we go. So that looks pretty good. I think I want to add some grain as well. So if we go up to filter, I think I need to actually have a layer of paint there. Yeah, we'll add some noise here. Okay, and we'll change this to multiply. We'll put this underneath the lookup table. Just going to put that set to multiply and put it underneath the other layer effects and put the opacity set to low. And I think that's going to be my final image. And we're going to go ahead and save this out. We'll do that by exporting it as a quick PNG. Okay, so this is the final image. And just to compare, this is what I started with. This was the fixed render. You'll notice the preview here has the light levels kind of all over the place, and with the final color lookup applied and some of the levels adjusted, we have a more polished image. Okay, now I want to go ahead and make an evening scene where we have some lights illuminating from inside and we have the sun low. So let's go ahead and duplicate our sky texture. Just drop this into the color, and I think what we'll do is take that elevation. Let's have it go this way. So 180 degrees is going to be flat. So we want it just above or just under 180. If we look through our camera, we can see some warm light hitting the side of our walls here. We can increase the intensity to 1. And I think what we want to do is now add some lights to the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and add some spotlights to the center area. So I just framed this so I could easily rotate around. Let's go ahead and click Shift A and add spotlight. Okay, and I'm going to turn on the rotate handle. We're going to have this rotate up. I think if I had a little more time, I would build some actual lamps pointed up at this so it makes more sense. But for now, I'm just going to make this something like a 300 watt warm light source. So I'm going to pick a warm light color. You can also use the nodes for this. So if you click on use nodes and then go to object, it will basically operate your light with an emission. So the other thing we can do is add a black body to this. And a black body is essentially the kind of color temperature that's used to get lights in your house. Anywhere from 3,700 or 2,700 to 5,000. So in this case, we're going to do warm light, so 3,700. Actually, let's do 2,700. And make this strength of 2 for now. And so we're going to go ahead and maybe try to make this a little less sharp in terms of the shadows being cast. So if I increase the radius of this, it will cast softer light. I'm going to duplicate this, and if I grab the blue handle, it'll move in the X and Y axes. So now let's rotate on the Z. Let's try to essentially illuminate as much of this as we can. Okay, I'm going to just look straight down so I can more easily set this up. So I'm basically just doing Shift D to duplicate, and I'm rotating it so they're pointed at this object. I have 3 in the front, and I think I want at least 1 in the back. Okay. So we can see on the left here I have a render window set up looking through our render camera. So this one's looking a little dim, so let's see if I can turn this so it, actually I think we want this one here. Okay, I see. So we want to take this one and maybe turn it. Maybe angle it a bit down so we don't get into the ceiling quite as much. Okay, now we have some illumination happening. And then this one I think needs to be illuminated a bit better. Okay, we could probably take the, oh, I guess I have to do this over here. Probably take this down to 1 instead of a 2. You don't have to use the nodes, by the way. I just like to make use of the black body node to get an appealing color temperature without having to do a lot of work. Okay, so this is looking pretty well lit. We may want to add some ground lights along the edges. So I think what I can do there is we're going to add a circle. And we will edit this and fill it. And I think we can I'm going to extrude this up. I'm going to extrude this out by pressing E and then S to scale. And then we're going to extrude down. So this is going to be, oops, I don't think I extruded that very well. Let's try that again. EZ, okay. Let's try that again, Z, there we go. Now it's working. Let's bring it down maybe a little bit more. Okay, that's good. And then what we'll do is make a new material. We'll make this a dark base color metallic. We'll add another material slot. We'll add a new material here and we'll make this emissive. And we'll add a black body node, plug that in, make this 2700. Let's do a strength of 4. And let's apply this material to this face. So I'll select that face, select this material, click assign, and let's go into this mode here. We kind of created an LED puck kind of a thing. So let's shade this smooth and do auto. Let's do auto smooth there. That should be good. We can add a bevel. Actually, we shouldn't need this because it's going to be pretty small on the ground. So let me turn on snapping. Let's do faces. All right, let's go top down, move this into the corner. It's way too big, so I need to scale this down to be very small. Okay. There we go. And we're going to use an array modifier. Let's apply the scale and add modifier, generate array. And we're going to do the Y direction, negative. Let's do 4. There we go. And now I can just very easily add lights on the ground. So I can add 20 lights without doing very much work, which is what we want. And now we want to press Shift D to duplicate that, and then we'll move these over here. Let me look straight down so I can see. Put that around there. Okay. All right, let's try 20. All right, I think they're still a little bit large. Maybe what I can do is scale the middle of it in a bit. And then maybe it's getting hard to see. Let me turn on solid view here. Let's scale this out. Just delete that since I won't be seeing it anyway. And then what I want to do with this one is do Shift D, I'm going to rotate on the Z, and we're going to pull this one so it's roughly equidistant. Okay, so now we have an evening shot. We have some lights. We have some wall lights here. We might want some lights to illuminate the sign, but the sun coming in from the side is actually doing a pretty good job. Let's just take a render and see what it looks like. I'm going to reduce the size of the image so that we can get a faster preview. So I'm going to render it at 50% size. and do render. So what I can do is I can add some spotlights to these as well. Maybe I'll just try to see if I can get what I want out of adjusting these lights just with the emission strength. Let's try 60. Just going to reduce that count. Okay. I think that's working a little better. Would be nice to maybe have lights a bit more prevalent. If we take a look at the fountain, if I can focus on it here. So the fountain has this ring underneath. So if I'm able to create a kind of like an LED recess in here, that could be really good. So I'm going to try it and see how it works. Okay, with that still selected, I'm going to go to Materials and add a channel here. And we're going to select this glowing material. We're going to call this emissive. I'm going to click Assign. And yeah, now we can see how it's working. Okay, maybe it's a bit too bright, so maybe what I'll do is click on the users here and make it a single user. Now we can call this emissive 2. And let's just reduce that strength to 10, maybe 5. I think it might be actually too warm. So maybe I can bump this up to 3,000. 3,500. Yeah, that might be a little bit better. Okay, let's render this. Okay, let's save this out. Let's go ahead and do some tone mapping. see if we can find a color lookup that looks better at nighttime. So I think what I'm going to do is take the teal orange plus contrast and just put it slightly on, maybe something like an 8%. And that gives me a nice contrast between the blue and orange colors. So I think with that, I'm going to call this one also finished. So I'm going to save this out. Okay, so this is the final evening image, and just to compare that, here is the mid-afternoon image from earlier. Okay, thanks so much for following along as I created this scene. Now you can go ahead and build one for yourself. Hopefully there's some information that you're able to adapt and use to make your own work better.